Right, as people start getting logged on still, I'm just going to go ahead and do my announcements here. So welcome everybody. My name is Amy Forbes. I'm the training manager with the Northwest Mental Health and Technology Transfer Center, or we like to say the MHTTC. And welcome to today's webinar, Do You See Me? Silence versus Voicelessness with Sharonda Jamerson. I'll try and go through my slides here. Okay. First of all, I'd like to do just a brief overview of what the MHTTC network actually is. The Northwest MHTTC, which you can see in the bright pink circle there, we're a part of a nationwide network supported by SAMHSA. Our network includes 10 regional centers and then a network coordinating office, which is out of Stanford University. The MHTTC network supports resource development and dissemination, training and technical assistance, and workforce development for the mental health field. And you can see in Region 10 that we support Alaska, Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. And I'll briefly go over this slide. There's a lot of information on there. Our goals at the MHTTC are to support mental health related EVPs and best practices, heighten awareness and knowledge and skills for the mental health workforce, foster alliances and address diversity of training needs, and then share free publicly available training and technical assistance. Our areas of focus include evidence-based practices for psychosis, which is CBTP, and then ACT, or assertive community treatment. We also do a host of other things too, other webinars. And then important is we do provide live and recorded webinars, virtual learning communities. We have online self-paced courses. We have a resource library. And then you can also hear more about Sharonda and other people on our podcast called Putting It Together. Just a few housekeeping things we have before we start. We will send a link to the webinar recording and the slides, as well as your certificate of attendance after this webinar. So please look for those in your email. Hopefully it does not go to spam email, but check everywhere. During the webinar, we're going to have two boxes. So we have the chat box, which you can use if you have general observations, you need help from myself or Peyton, who's my co-host here. If you just general greetings or things that you want to go out to everybody. Please use the Q&A box if you have specific questions for Sharonda during this webinar that you would like to have answered live. We're going to try and get to as many as possible throughout the webinar. And I do need to let you know that at the end of the webinar, we're going to share a link to an evaluation or survey. We do really, really appreciate that you fill it out if you'd like. It really helps us learn what we can be doing better, and it helps us learn what people are wanting. A disclaimer too is that although SAMHSA does not have any official position on the content of what we're presenting, we are required to offer the survey to everybody. Oops. These are just some ways that you can, once again, connect with us. We do have a newsletter that goes out, and definitely connect on our website. And in the future, in the very near future, which 2 days from now, we're going to have a training with Lamar Lewis. He is going to present on cultural humility and responsiveness as a mental health professional. And then next week, Sharonda will be back with us and she'll be discussing and presenting on white trauma, creating space for white people's vulnerability with the hopes of undoing the perpetuation of structural and systemic racism. And again, please go to our website if you would like to register for those events. And we do have many more events there. So with that, I would like to welcome Sharonda Jamerson. Sharonda obtained a master's degree in clinical psychology in 2012 from City University College in Seattle, Washington. She became certified as a chemical dependency professional in 2007. Her experiences include developing, implementing, and presenting EDI trainings to associations of healthcare professionals, healthcare providers, schools, and community-based organizations. She has also presented at state and national behavioral health conferences on the topics of DEI and healthcare equity. Sharonda presents with confidence and passion, and we are ecstatic to have you here today, Sharonda. So with that, I will let you share your screen and begin the presentation.
Just a quick interjection. I think Sharonda's having trouble hearing us right now.
Oh.
Not sure why. I'm trying to figure out in the chat, but
Okay.
I will be right back.
Can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yay.
You can?
Okay. I'm on my phone. Yep.
Hooray!
Woo!
Wow, that
I'm so
was
sorry, you guys.
amazing. Wow. Okay, so I'll let you get to it. But Sharonda, you're just one of the best of all times. And thank you everyone for your patience. I hope not too many people left. But you know, it's just one of those days. And we're gonna just be in such a treat. So off you go. Thank you so much, everybody, for your patience.
So, okay. So everyone are we here? Is everyone, okay, we're here. I apologize. I'm not tech savvy and I accidentally sent out the line that was for me. And so therefore I couldn't get back in. So anyway, I've lost some time, so I'm trying to make up some time. So we're gonna start with the practice, and I'll go through this pretty quickly. One of the reasons why I do the practice is because we all carry our own set of traumas, and then our own guilt, our own shame. And so what I'm hoping that as we go through this training, that we will be able to allow for whatever comes up, allow it to come up. Feel your feelings. Don't push it down. Don't rationalize it. Don't feel them. That's what I need you to do. Translate your meaning. Say what you mean what you say, and don't say what you think others want to hear. So speak your truth. Don't worry about anyone else, because this is not about anyone else. You got to go to bed with you. You got to wake up with you. This is about you. Listen to yourself. If you choose to blend in with the crowd, then you will give up an opportunity to step out from the crowd. And it's hard to see what needs to be changed when you're part of the crowd. Give your accurate location. Own your experience in real time. Whatever you're feeling is okay. Just own them. Don't deny them. Don't rationalize them. Just own them. Just sit with them. Demonstrate that you are coachable. We need to be open to self-discovery without being concerned about popular opinion or hurt feelings. We can't control other people's feelings, so we can't be concerned about them if we can't control them. Objective. Increase awareness of how unconscious or unspoken racism compromise decisions and outcomes. Create a safe environment where youth of color can be fully seen as they are without pretense. And pretense is an attempt to make something that is not true, and it's not. Decrease harm to marginalized communities, including the staff. And if you can't listen to the staff when they come to you and tell you that this is how you impacted me or this is what I'm feeling, and you can't be with that person or show empathy, then how can you do it for a client or a patient who may not give you feedback or advocate for themselves? Can you hear me? So tolerance. throughout the years, we teach our kids, or the school has taught us to be tolerant of one another. Tolerance is not, it's not good. It's to endure. We may not like you. We may not understand you. We don't care to like you. We don't care to understand you, but we can endure you for a second. Then we get to go to our own lives, and you get to go to your life. And that's that. When we part ways after being in the same place, we walk away as strangers. So if we're trying to move from tolerance to acceptance, we have to allow ourselves to get to know other people, other cultures in ways that we never have, and stop making assumptions about what we think we know. Actually go into them, ask the questions, be involved, participate in the activities, so you can really understand that it don't mean you have to like it, but it gives you a greater understanding. And especially if you're seeing clients or you're a provider and you're seeing patients who don't look like you, it's important for you to understand their culture. Different cultures allow for different healing processes. Western medicine is not a one-size-fits-all. So the social stratification. The social stratification is to those who have been this is a false structure that was put in place to make sure that those who have continue to have, and those who don't have continue not to have. There's some who slip through the crack, but still, as you look at this pyramid, it's the pyramid of capitalism. As you can see, they said we will eat for you, you will work for us, we will shoot you, and we will, let's see, I gotta get this out the way, and we will fool you. So think about that. They will fool us. That's what capitalism is. So why are we going back and forth with each other when we're not the problem? It's the system that has been set up to cause us to go after each other versus the system. When George Floyd died, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we go further down the training, but when George Floyd died, we came together in ways that we never have, and we was able to push the system to do the things that we need them to do to better our relationships and to better us and to get some of our needs met. So that's the whole point in this whole conversation. And so we can see each other in ways that the system said, no, we don't want it. As to why they're putting rules and laws about what we can and cannot learn about each other. Why do you think they're doing that? Because there's power in number. There's power if we come together. There was power in slavery, why they had to separate the indigenous slaves to, black slaves, white slaves and black slaves. We start coming together. They start pushing back. It was more of us than it was of them. And they knew they had to separate us or we could overtake them. And I'm hoping that day is still on the table to where we can come together and overtake them. So our forefathers put together the Constitution, but there are other people who formed the identity of the United States of America, like Canadian-born disposition. He defended slavery. A lot of white people defended slavery. A lot of white people in the upper echelons defended, the elite defended slavery. He also said, and many white people who was up there in the elite area has also felt this way, said that that people of African descent are essential to do the white man's work, but we don't get the white man's pay. Even whites who oppose slavery believe that others could not be absorbed into white society. That still exists to this day. But here we go. We have someone named Donald Yucabon, great historian. He says that white supremacy preceded the origins of the United States. Every aspect of social interaction, particularly in the 18th and 19th centuries, was dominated by white identity, and white supremacy became an expression of white identity. A white supremacy became an expression of Americans' identity. These sentiments can also be found in Americans' Christianity. So there's racism in there as well. So we have the Daughters of the Confederacy. The United States, daughter of the Confederacy, spent decades shaping and reshaping textbooks to put strong emphasis on the lost cause and the Reconstruction, which glorified the white supremacy foundations of the Confederacy and was used to justify segregation and authoritarian Jim Crow. So even when we come through our educational system, these hidden nuggets were in there. So if it wasn't overt, it was subliminal. so we can believe what we need to believe in order to stay segregated. And I don't know how many people, I'm not a historian, but I do love history. And what my history revealed to me is that it was only 500 slave owners. So it was hundreds of thousands of people in society at the time, but it was only 500 who was elite and had power. And so they taught the other white people who didn't have that kind of power, but you're still better than you're still better than everyone else because you have that white skin. Trust me when I tell you, poor white people have more in common with people of color than they do with the elite whites. You suffer when you don't understand your own trauma. So we have Thorman. He was a segregationist in the South, and he was segregation now, segregation forever. The lady, the black lady on the right, that was his lover. The woman in the middle, that's his daughter. But he's out there spewing. So here's where they say they trick us. They say one thing and they turn around and do another thing. And he even supported this young lady. And he didn't mention out loud that was his daughter, but he met in chamber. He supported her kids. He was in her life, but yelling and spewing other things that were not true. So why is it okay for him to have an interracial relationship, which they said was illegal, especially where he lived at, but we cannot even have a platonic relationship, more or less a romantic relationship? So let's talk about what racism is. Racism at its most basic level is the lens in which people interpret, naturalize, and reproduce inequality. We all struggle to truly see one another due to the conditioning that has been imposed upon us through the accumulation of lies and deceit. It has become the breeding ground for implicit bias and racial disconnection. This is why it's so hard. This is why it's so difficult for us to have real conversations about real things that matter. Things that heal. Racism is not a white issue. It is a systematic structural issue that builds a dominant culture into the position of power. The white culture. This position oppresses those who don't identify as white. Our biases go where we go, in our homes, in our workplace, in our schools, in our community, etc. It is crucial for us, we the people, to fix what is broken inside ourselves, in our community, and our society. With this definition, there's been an argument going back and forth about, can people of color be racist? I can't see the chat, but that's the question I'm going to ask you. Do you believe that people of color can be racist? And I will answer that toward the end. Okay, my slides are not moving. There we go.
Sharonda, I'm sorry, really quick. This is Amy.
Yeah.
We do have a lot of people saying yes, absolutely yes, a couple no's.
Yes. So if you go by this definition, internationalized, truly other. So any policies and system that anyone who plays a role in the policies that allows for white people to be the dominant culture can be racist despite the color. Clarence Thomas is one of those people who voted down voting rights. He is someone in power. He is the one oppressing the people of color. So yes, people of color absolutely can be can be a racist because they're pushing those policies and supporting those policies that are oppressing other communities and keeping a dominant culture on top. Well, you forced me into that one. So white supremacy, most people think about, the white sheets and the KKK, but it's more, and that right there takes our attention away from the biggest things that affect people of color, which is the social, economic, and political systems that collectively enable white people to maintain in power. So when we're only focusing on bodily harm, we're not watching the financial harm, we're not watching the mental harm, we're not watching, looking out for the educational harms. These are also harms that have been done to us when we only focus on one thing. It's a ruse, so we won't have to focus on these other things that is causing even greater harm. And white privilege. A lot of people say, oh, well, I grew up poor. I am poor. Our family fought, blah, 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 blah. Privilege is going to school, being able to see someone who looks like you, a teacher, a professor, a doctor, being able to see someone who you feel understand, because and I'll get down to further down the training, statistics shows that when you are dealing with someone who look like you give them more credibility, and therefore you're apt to listen to them versus rationalize and minimize what they have to say. You participate in what they're saying, and you can actually hear them. That is a privilege. Rationalized trauma, the cumulative effect of racism on an individual's mental and physical health that led to trauma symptoms, including anxiety, depression, and suicide ideation, as well as physical health issues. If I'm talking too fast, let me know. I'm trying to get through this because we started late, and it's my fault. So here's the effects of structural power and privilege from the system that we just got through talking about. Top richest people, most people in Congress, governors, military advisors, House Freedom Caucus, current president cabinet. The people who decide what TV shows to bring forth. And matter of fact, here we go. I don't know if you guys seen that the movie Origin is out. I didn't see any advertisement for Origin. And normally when you don't see any advertisement, it's because it's an educational show that is teaching us something that they don't want us to be taught. And if Origin, the movie that's out, that's playing now, if that was part of a curriculum, they would ban it. So go see it. We're gonna move on to the next slide. What about my rights? You have no rights which a white man has, the white man was bound to respect. That's what was actually written in law. When Mr. Scott went to go ask for his rights because he was a free black man, they said, no. No. You better be lucky that you're even here to be able to talk to us. Acknowledging implicit bias and how they can create barriers. And when we want your opinion, we'll tell you what it is. And what happens when you are an independent thinker? When you're an independent thinker, you're dangerous because you buck against the system and you don't accept your subjugation. And then we have what we call white rage. So Carol Anderson from Emory University professor wrote, the presence of black and brown people is not the trigger for white rage. It is the presence of black and brown people with ambition, drive, aspiration, who achieve more, who don't accept their subjugation, people who demand their rights. These are the kind of things that drive the elite crazy and those who follow the elite. And when they see that another culture or group of people is getting something that they don't feel they deserve or that is equal to them, they're going to act out because they feel like something's being taken away from them, which is not true. White rage can be hard to detect because it is cloaked in reasonableness. We need to keep our community safe. We must protect our children. We must ensure safety and security for our neighbors. We fear for our lives. If honesty is the best policy, then why are there laws to create us from learning the truth about our past, about each other, about what's really going on? Why gaslight the people? Why say one thing when you're really doing something else? Or why say something that you know is not true? During the Reagan administration, he was saying he's going against drugs and, was Reagan just say no? And Reagan was one of the number one presidents who was putting money in treatment for people. But he was saying, oh, we're going to fight against crime and this, that, and the other. No one knew how much money he put toward that. So a lot of times the people who we put in office say that they're for us. And it just really, I'm not going to lie, it irks me when I say, well, the people want. What do you know what the people want? Because when we lift our voice and elevate our voice and say, this is what we want and what we don't want, the things we say we don't want, we get. The things we say we want, we don't get. So what does that mean that people want? No, it's what you want. I'm sorry, I'm getting excited here. I'm calm down a little bit.
Hey, Sharonda. You do great. There's a question in the chat. I think it was from a couple slides back. It says, please define they. Who are they?
Okay, which slide?
It was
I'm always talking about the elite.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Which ones though?
It was, I believe, right. Go forward one.
Go forward.
Yeah, it was around this one or that one.
This one or
And maybe
this one or
Cynthia,
this one?
yeah, maybe Cynthia
Yeah.
can, yeah.
When I say they, I am specifically talking about lawmakers and the elite. That's who I'm talking about. That's what I'm referring to. Each and every time. A lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to put on its pants. And look at the people in leadership right now. So we have one FBI agent who is now being indicted for lying about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Why are we to this place where we put our hands on the Bible and say what we will and will not do and how we're going to protect and serve, and we lie? Why? What are we trying to accomplish? So here we go, truth versus reality. Because we are missing out on time, I can circle back to this, but just know that the truth allows for you to be uncomfortable and allows for you to grow. Reality is when you take the truth and you bend it toward what you need it to mean in order for you not to be uncomfortable, in order for you to stay stuck. That's a simple answer. Cycles in relationships. So when a person expresses what they are feeling or how they are experiencing what was just said or done in the form of a complaint or an attack, this behavior will trigger an adversarial cycle, and it will keep the person at arm's length. It will keep you a stranger. Matter of fact, it will keep you someone who can't stand each other and just don't want to be around each other. We have to be willing to open up and listen. Oh, sorry. Avoidance is when you keep thoughts to yourself, change the subject, or minimize what is being said to avoid having to have the courageous conversation. This behavior keeps a person at arm's length, and each person avoids saying what they really feel and remain unfamiliar with one another. It's not good, because at the end of the day, you're holding that in. Whatever that is, you're holding in. And that's not healthy or good for you, because guess what? What goes in will come out, just a matter of time. Okay. Cycles in relationship. When you engage, when someone say or do something that doesn't sit well with you, engage the person and ask questions that will allow you to gain a deeper understanding of what was said or done. Then return the favor by informing the offender of how what they said or did, or what they said or done, and how it impacts you. Have the courageous conversation. Allow for both parties to get familiar with one another. The point is to seek understanding before seeking to be understood. Understanding doesn't always equal agreement, and that's okay. Just get the conversation going. Barriers. Lack of understanding equal lack of meaningful relationship. Judging is easier than understanding. Lack of understanding creates barriers. Barriers reinforce ignorance, and ignorance of the cycle, we perpetuate that by staying in our ignorance. So here we go. Silence versus voicelessness. So here, silence is a choice. So people will choose to remain silent, and I'm not talking about the elite now. I'm talking about people like us. Those of us who are on this presentation, and myself. People choose to remain silent to avoid conflict, but I will tell you, conflict is necessary as we're trying to get to know each other. Because when we're trying to get to know each other, conflict allows for the body to be stressed. The stress will push things out of our bodies that we didn't even know that was inside of us. It allows us to there's things that we're trying to say, but we can't get it out until we actually have that conflict. And then we can begin to understand what one is trying to say. But a one try and stop is not going to get us there. We have to get in there and hold space for one another as we're trying to understand and get to know get to know one another. When doing the right thing is not popular, we don't say anything. We choose not to say anything. When it's when it's perceived that speaking up will hurt their chances at success, won't say anything. When being too concerned about other people's opinion, we won't say anything. We don't want to be labeled. The other thing is, I will tell you, is that there was some in the hospital that I work at. There was 2 white nurses who seeing some injustices happening, and they wanted to step in and do the right thing. They didn't realize how much it was going to cost them. And what they said is had I known what I know, I would have never got involved. And that's the privilege that some of us have and others do not. Speak the truth. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I heard a pause. I just wanted to come in with a question or statement regarding that slide. This person would love to hear how silence can look in school from a teacher and staff, further how to bridge the gap in education.
So how silence can look in school?
Yeah, look in a school setting from a teacher and staff in a school setting.
Okay, so like right now, there's a lot of materials that are being banned. Are you going to just go along with what you know is not true and continue to teach what you know is not true? Or are you going to speak up and say, we're teaching the wrong things. We're educators. We're supposed to be helping, our kids who are going to be the future. Do we want to send them out with this mess, or do we want to send them out with the truth? You got to discern how much of a risk, because anytime you speak the truth to power, it's going to be a risk. So you got to figure out what it is you're willing to lose. For me, getting fired is not a loss. It's not. Being written up is not a loss. Trying to be blackballed is not a loss. What is a loss to me is losing my identity that I worked so hard to create. That's a loss. When I've lost that, I've lost everything. And then you have the choice to either suffer in silence and suffer the internal cost, or speak your truth and suffer the external cost. And me personally, I would take the external over the internal every day of the week. Why? Because the external, you can bounce back a little quicker. The internal is just that much harder to find your self-esteem again, find your voice again, to speak your truth again. It's just difficult. As we get down, I think I will go into this. I got 2 trainings back to back, so I can't remember what's all in this one. But yes, you got to figure out what are you willing, what is the cost? And let me explain something to you. When one door opens or one door closed, another door opens. So when you think you're called to do it this way, trust me, you will find another way to get it done. Speak the truth, even if your voice shakes. Silence is the tool of white ideology. Your silence can be taken as consent. Here we go. My voice was taken through dominance, constant surveillance, oppression, direct trauma, vicarious trauma, microaggression, stereotypes, prejudice, and not meeting social standards. And let me get this one too. It says, people of color are exposed to different kinds of racism, whether historical, collective, institutional, systematic, interpersonal, and generational. Those are the levels of race of traumas that we are under and that we experience. And on top of it, some of them passed down to us. Some of them is systematic. Some of it is what we endure as we come in contact with white bodies. And we will talk about white trauma next week. This week, we're on trauma of people of color. So what is dominance? How does dominance sense the harm and control the room? And this might go back to the question about the teacher. How do we bridge that gap? So dominance says, you teach what we tell you to teach, or you can go somewhere else. Be careful how you tread, or you will pay the cost. Or if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else and I can help you get there. So it's always a threat, whether it's an overt threat or a threat of undertone threat. It's a threat. That's how they keep people in line. Threatening their career. There's more than one way to kill a person, right? Their reputation, their career, their finances. That's where dominance says, or your education. I'm not gonna let you finish this. I know they try to take away my education. I was 2 classes away from graduating, and not only that, the teacher told me that I wasn't gonna do well in this field because I wasn't good enough. See, what she didn't understand is I wasn't trying to come out here and please the white majority anyway. I was trying to come out here to catch my people to help them because I know they're not being treated fairly, and they're not educated. Matter of fact, here, let me just share this one with you. It says, in order for Black people to address their experiences and ultimately work toward healing, racial trauma needs to be acknowledged and implemented into mental health treatment and trainings. Racial trauma has its own set of challenges and effects on the victim. Then it goes on to say, more mental health programs still do not offer official trainings around racial trauma. This is a debilitating effect on people of color. This is how I know that people who look like me is not getting the service they need or they deserve, because there's not enough people who are willing to say racism. They're now starting to do some research now using the word racism. And people are still, jumping and scared of the word. You can't be scared of the word if you're trying to change something. Deny me my definitions and control my story with your narrative. What I mean by that, so Colin Kaepernick was very, very, very clear why he took a knee. He said, I don't like the way people of color are being treated in this society. He was very vocal. He said what he said. He meant what he said. And then guess what happened? You got the elite again. I'm talking about the elite people. You got them saying, oh, he's not a patriot. Oh, he hates police officers. And he never said anything of the sort. They're taking what he said and they're changing the narrative. Why? So they can justify why they treat him the way they treat him. And they can justify why they treat others the way they treat others. So we really got to be careful how we label people, because labels come with social norms. And once we label people, then we feel justified in treating them accordingly, because society said, this is what I can do because this is the kind of person they are. And then expectations of gratitude. After everything I've done for you, you're going to say that about me? After everything I did for you, you're going to do this? So it's like, appreciate everything that I've done for you, and don't disappoint me by revealing my character. Don't disappoint me by telling people what I really am about. Keep it to yourself, and you continue to get rewarded. So it's that I've done this for you, I've opened doors for you, and so therefore you show me some gratitude and keep your mouth shut. Changes. We must change what we are looking for within self and others so we can change what we see. We can't dive into our greatness until we touch the depths of our suffering. Healing and change takes place within relationships, not policies or law. And when we're talking about trauma, trauma is found in the body. So traditional education, cognitive therapy is not going to solve that problem of trauma being in the body. There's body work that must be done in order for us to be able to heal, free up some of the nerves in our body that holds our trauma, in order for us to be able to accept something or someone else, or even ourselves for that matter. So when you tell people you get on my nerves, that's a real thing. That's not just a slang. We will never be able to see others until we're able to see ourselves. Once we begin to see ourselves, then we will be able to appreciate the different worldview with less judgment. Lack of understanding of the unique life experiences allow for rationalization, minimization, and dismissal. So what am I talking about? So if you have a client in front of you who don't look like you, whose culture is different than yours, whose sexuality is different than yours, your religion is different than yours, they come and try to tell you something that you have no reference for. Oh, well, maybe you meant this, or maybe it's really that, or maybe it's not that bad. Don't disrespect the person who you're there to help by minimizing or rationalizing or changing their experience. This is why people do not like coming, seeking out help, whether it's medically, mentally, or medications or anything like that, because they don't feel heard. And if you don't hear what a person is saying, how can you help? Me as a therapist, one thing I know is the people sitting across from me, they have to teach me them in order for me to be able to help them. I don't come in with an agenda and be like, oh, this is what your problem is and this is how we're going to solve it. No, you've got to invite the patient or the client into the conversation. That's the only way you're going to get a win-win. Win-win is that you're going to help the patient and you're going to learn. That's how that works. A lack of knowledge about culture systems of healing needs will not be met. There are some cultures who they don't really care about reducing symptomologies. They care more about their communities. How can they get back into their community or stay on good grace with their community or with their family? That's what they care about. They want support surrounding that, because if they do it that way, if you help them get back in good grace with their communities or tell them, some of the things they can do to get, to support their communities, then their healing will start because their community has accepted and appreciate them. The Western stuff, it doesn't work for everybody. Lack of participation in one's, that's a typo, sorry you guys, one's own treatment allows for early termination of services. You got to allow people to participate in their own services. So let's go to microaggressions. Microaggressions are very specific, the kind of remarks, questions, or actions that are painful because they have to deal with a person's membership in a group that discriminate against or subject to stereotypes. And a key part of what makes them so disconcerting is that they happen casually, frequently, and often without any intent, without harm or intention. So, what is that? Like you're in a break rooms cooking your food or warming up. What is that smell? Can I touch your hair? Where are you from? Oh, no, where are you really from? Oh, no, your English is really good. Oh, wow, you speak good. You can finish a sentence, as you sound very intelligent as a person of color. Those are not good, people. Research also showed that microaggressions, although they are seemingly small and sometimes innocent offenses, can take a real psychological toll on the mental health of their participants. This toll can lead to anger and depression and can even lower productivity and problem-solving ability. It can also lead to hostile environment. And it can also trigger someone's trauma that is stored in their bodies. Anger, frustration, exhaustion, depression, recipients of microaggressions. Culture and diversity. We need to focus on cultural values. It's not supposed to be culture and values, that's another typo. And social political realities, of minorities. So we know that there's two Americas. We know the same rules don't apply to all. We know this. The laws are different, opportunities are different, access is different. It's just different. Techniques used with Caucasians are inherently different from those needed when dealing with people of color. People of color historically terminate permanently after one session of treatment. People of color underuse services available to them because they don't feel seen or heard. And this is where I was saying that research shows that if a person is sitting across from you, you're going to have a difficult time connecting because you don't give them the benefit of the doubt. But if they look like you give them more benefit of the doubt, and the chances that you are not minimizing or rationalizing, and allows for you to connect with them on a deeper level. Provider's awareness. A culturally skilled provider is one who moves from being culturally unaware to being culturally sensitive to his or her own culture heritage while respecting the difference of others. The culturally skilled provider is aware of personal biases and the possible effect on the outcome of the therapeutic intervention with people of color. The culturally skilled provider is comfortable with differences of race, religion, sexuality, disability, etc. The culturally skilled provider acknowledges personal attitudes, beliefs, and feelings. Implicit bias are attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, decision-making, and behavior without even realizing it. So again, if you go back to the top of this training and with the slides, it shows how we got these biases. And so then my question is, have you checked your bias? There's a Harvard bias test that you can take to see where your biases lie. But also what you can do is, we'll get to that because we'll talk about managing your biases. Here we go. So managing personal bias. Becoming aware of your own biases, as I said, you can take the test, or you can slow down and ask yourself if your responses are warranted. Now, why did I do that? Would I have done this in a different setting? Would I have done it with a different group of people? Like, you got to really start questioning yourself. Because what I found is that people who try to justify their actions, when you then question, why did you say that, or why did you do that? And it's like, yeah, I don't really know. Understand that our initial ideology has been passed down to us and reinforced a lot of times through culture, religion, and these systems that we are forced to participate in, right? So if you don't understand or can't justify your actions, then you got to stop and ask yourself, where did I get this? Is it relevant today? Is this part of who I want to be? There was one person after 9/11 said that they had no issues with, with those who wear the hijab or wear the other head wraps, until she got on the plane, and all of a sudden she's seen someone with a head wrap on, and then she got scared. She didn't even know that that's what seeped into her. There was another white guy who went to go pick up his kids at school, and he's seen a lot of black dads picking up their kids, and he was like, for some reason I didn't think black dads were in their kids' lives. So, or you see someone driving down the street and they're not driving good. Oh, that must be Asian driving. Where are we getting these from? Where are we picking this up at? And is it relevant and is it true? We got to check ourselves. Positive or negative stereotypes that influence perceptions of people. Be careful about making decisions by intuition if you don't know what the intuition is rooted in. If your foundation is deeply rooted in religion, and so therefore anyone who don't fit that religion, that's what your gut is telling you, you probably shouldn't rely on that. If you are rooted in white supremacy, you probably shouldn't rely on that. If it's rooted in segregation, you probably shouldn't rely on that. Be careful about, elicit diverse input into the decisions. So when you, there's a situation that happened in our cafeteria about 3-4 years back when Juneteenth was finally introduced and they wanted to celebrate. The heart was in a good place. But, the execution wasn't that great. So they wanted to celebrate Black History Month, or maybe it was Juneteenth. It was one of those. And they came up with the most stereotypical food on the menu, and it really pissed a lot of Black people off. So the next thing, what they did was instead of thinking they brought people to the table, a diverse group of people to the table, and said, hey, when it comes down to celebrating whether it's Cinco de Mayo or whether it's African American or Jewish or whatever the case may be, what should we be cognizant of? What should we do? And they got feedback on what would work, why it would work. And every year since then, they have been on the money. It's been good because they stopped trying to make decisions for the people and start asking the people. And then practice some humility. Now, normally I don't add youth into my slides, but our youth are off the hook, and we need to understand why and how it impacts them. In 2019, even before COVID-19, 13% of adolescents report having major depression episodes. It's a 60% increase from 2007. 88% increase in emergency room visits by children and adolescents for anxiety, mood disorder, and self-harm. I'm trying to pay attention to the time, sorry. Suicide rates for people ages 10 to 24 were stable. Was stable from 2000 to 2007. It was a big leap, 60%. It jumped up 60% by 2018. And as you can see, so the first line, the red line, if you can see that, is the female. The middle line is both, and then the lower line is males, represent the male population. So, increase in stressors over the last several years. COVID-19, the murder of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. Depression and anxiety spiked the week following the murder, particularly amongst Black and Hispanic youth. And on the flip side of that, when President Obama became president, registration for Black males went up in college for college registration. In 2019 to 2020, increase in children's mental health related emergency visits went up 24% for the ages of 5 to 11, 31% from the ages for those who are between the ages of 12 and 17. significant decline in primary and preventative services. Now, the need is going up, but the preventative services are going down. Services include assessment for physical and cognitive development needs, can provide early detection of autism, development delays, and other conditions. Also, the fact that I know when I was growing up, we had the Boys and Girls Club. There was the Big Brothers, Big Sisters. There was just a lot of things for us to do when I was coming up that these kids just don't have access to. And majority of our kids are getting kicked out of school left and right when they're kids of color. And then the longer, and I used to work in school, so I know this. So the longer that the kids get kicked out of school, the harder it's going to be for them to catch up, and then they drop out. So, and that's by design. I mean, it's just by design. Indicating factors. Adolescents are getting less sleep, less exercise, and in-person time with friends, all crucial for health development. Mental health crisis, and these kids do grow up, by the way. Mental health crisis is often attributed to the rise in social media, but solid data are limited, and findings are often contradictory. Limited access to care. Depression is most common amongst those with the least access to any health care, including mental health. Severe shortage in therapists and treatment, particularly therapists of color. Insufficient research to explain the trend. And then early onset puberty is now 12. In 1990, it was 14. So we're getting younger. Part of what's in the food. So 10.6 in 2020, 10.6 children have symptoms of anxiety and depression. Average students to counselor ratio 331 to 1. I don't know how that works, but it doesn't work. I can tell you that right now. State budget, they poured in $50 million to improve access to services, to increase awareness and resilience building, to provide support, professional development in communities, schools and college campuses. And let's see, adolescent. So there's the 7.7% of 12 to 17-year-olds who report drug use. In the last month, 86.5 report marijuana use, 2% report misuse of pain reliever, less than 1% report other substance use, 9.5 use alcohol, 3.7 more likely to use alcohol than average U.S. adolescents, 2.5 met criteria for illicit drug use dependent, and 1.5 met criteria for adolescent use dependence. 304,000 young adults ages 18 to 25 use drugs in the last month. 6.1 less likely to use drugs than the average. Youth experience has spiked in symptoms of anxiety and depression, consistently higher than other age groups. And this is in New York. Well, there's some people here from New York, so I'm gonna go through this one. Metropolitan area, almost half the youth ages 18 to 24 reported symptoms of anxiety and depression. There is a New York doctor that I meet when I go into these conferences, Dr. Snyder. He specifically only worked with Black men. And he said why he worked with Black men specifically is because not only do Black men can find some relief by working with another Black doctor, but also the fact that he's having a hard time keeping Black men blood pressure down. So he said when we go to sleep, our blood pressure and everything is supposed to drop. He said, but Black men, their blood pressure don't drop. They jump at everything that they hear. Any popping sound, anytime they see white bodies that get too close to them, they wonder what's going to happen to them. So he specifically worked to heal the Black male body. They 2 to 3%. I'm sorry, I digress. 2 to 3% of children ages 6 to 12 have serious depression. Adolescents are 0.25 less likely to have used drugs in the last month than the average U.S. adolescents. 8.3% of 12 to 17-year-olds report using drugs in the last month, and then so on and so forth. Key findings: 61%. How much drug use has gone up amongst eighth graders between 2016 and 2020? It might be even higher now. 62% of teenagers in 12th grade has abused alcohol. 50% of teenagers have misused drugs at least once. There's another statistics that I didn't find out until after this was put together, is gambling. Gambling has gone up tremendously amongst our young people. Adverse childhood experiences. The ACE study highlights the need for trauma-informed care. More than 17,000 individuals across the U.S. Show strong associations between childhood, adolescent traumatic experiences, and adult health risks, mental health, and healthcare costs, and life expectancy. ACEs and subsequent studies show that toxic stress during childhood is linked to chronic physiological and psychological and substance use disorder. Unchecked chronic stress is what breaks down the body. Now public health has a term for it called weathering. So people of color who is under all these different types of trauma and stress, our bodies break down much faster than white bodies, and white bodies outlive Black and brown bodies by 25 years for this very reason. People who experience repeat chronic or multiple traumas include historical traumas are more likely to have more pronounced symptoms and consequences, including, and this is from the CDC 2014, substance abuse, use and disorder, depression symptoms and disorder, anxiety symptoms and disorder, impairment in relationship and social and other major areas, life areas, increased risk of mental illness and increase in symptoms of severity, sleep disorder, poor work performance, financial stress, smoking, and suicide attempts. The implicit trauma. Unattended and adolescent pregnancies comes from these traumas, poor academic achievements, heightened risk for intimate partner violence, numerous health problems, physical disorder and conditions including liver disease, heart disease, and sexually transmitted infections, catastrophic expectancies, and emotional dysregulation. Trauma-informed care. Given the prevalence of trauma, it is crucial that we practice incorporating trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care is an approach that focuses on resilience and strength. It requires being aware of, understanding, recognizing, and responding to the effects of trauma. And if you recognize that there's a child or a person or a child or an adult or even an elderly that's in front of you and you don't really understand trauma, my advice is to pass it on to somebody who understands trauma a little bit more than you, because you can cause more harm. How do you promote strength? Work together as collaborators to establish mutual goals. This requires being adaptive and valuing differences. Healing perhaps in relationships. This requires reciprocal connection, bi-directional communication, and the deliberate fostering of understanding and shared learning. Be mindful of your words and your language. Allow people to tell their own story. Remember Colin Kaepernick? Activate communications and support of one's capabilities to heal and recover. And we got to be careful when we're trying to help someone recover from trauma, because if we go too fast, we can re-traumatize them. And understand that when someone has been traumatized, they don't have to go over their story again, because that could re-traumatize them as well, only if they want to. What is necessary is for them to be able to sit with the discomfort. The longer they sit with the discomfort, the easier it will get, the more it will free up the central nervous system in order to be able to take in more things that are healthy. So we got to push out the unhealthy things. We got to push out the things that are not working. We got to push out the conditioning that we have, and we got to download and suck up the things that we know is working, the things that we know is going to be helpful, and the things that we feel can get us further in life, and not just stick to our own. Ongoing training and capacity building for community and staff. Be flexible. Support staff efficacy. Perception of having control over one's circumstances and the perception of compatibility to effectively carry out actions. People who feel in control of their lives may be more likely to engage in health affirming activities, seek help, and participate in lifestyle that promotes health. Increase access to choices, more options, more choice, more buy-in. Create programs that promote safety and healing. So when you go into, sometimes there's closed AA meetings, they close it because they want to protect what people are saying, and people, they want people to be vulnerable so they can get those things out and be cared for and be supported. And the learning community is normally not recorded because, again, they want people to have the freedom to share what they really want to share without offending anyone. But again, it doesn't matter what you do. You're going to offend somebody regardless, whether it's because of your skin color, the way you wear your hair, the way you talk, being direct, you don't sugarcoat anything. You're going to offend people, period. And that's not on you. That's something that they got to deal with. Ask questions to increase self-efficacy. Tell me about the time that you made changes in your life. How did you do it? What personal strengths do you have? That would help you succeed? And who could offer you support? Provide social support. We're talking about emotional support, information. We got to make sure it's tangible. And the companionship has to be there as well. So what drives institutional organizational operations? So you have the dominant culture, and then you have the rational organizational culture. So the dominant, we're talking about perfectionism, sense of urgency, defensiveness. And when people are giving you feedback on a project or on something and you get defensive, then the question you need to ask yourself, what am I defending? Because one thing our bodies do is try to figure out if what someone's saying is dangerous or is a threat to us or not. And understand, when I'm talking about a threat, I'm not just talking about a physical threat. That could be a threat to my beliefs. That could be a threat to my religion. That could be a threat to my aspirations. That could be a threat to my goal. We all get reactive when we feel like there's a threat coming up against us. And over here, we avoid conflict. What else? There's single issues when there can be multiples. On the rational side, everything is a work in progress. So that means you're going to give people grace to make mistakes, let them recover from those mistakes, assist them in those mistakes, sustainability, openness, identify multiple variable paths, both and, not either or. Conflict is productive. We talked about that a little earlier. I can definitely give an example of that, like a real example. Discomfort is a teacher, so let it teach you. Relationship oriented, emotions are allowed. You're too emotional. No, well, if someone is, that's another. So a bit about trauma. So this is how a person or a culture or a community can get labeled when it comes to trauma. So normally when someone has been traumatized is because something happened to them. Then how that trauma shows up in the body is going to look different for everybody. But let's say my trauma is constantly coming up and I'm looking angry. So let's say that's how Black women got the stereotype that we're angry Black women, unapproachable. That could be our trauma. But when it said that, we're just angry Black women, or that's just who they are, or, that's part of their personality, guess what happens? We relabeled what it is. Put it to the side, put it in the category so we can move on. But when we label it as trauma, then we can deal with it and we can get rid of the symptoms. So a lot of times when we show up, let's say angry frequently, that's because our trauma is being triggered on a daily, on a regular. And so we get dismissed, and so it can be said, that's oh, they have a mental health issue or whatever the case may be, and it never get resolved. And then you get more trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, and then next thing you know, we're self-doubting ourselves, our confidence go down, our self-talk is different. We wonder what's wrong with us. Why can't we show up? Why can't we do anything different? And it's because we have not addressed the trauma that lives in our body, and people are judging us for it, and therefore we can't heal. So trauma can be, trauma shows up different for different people, but because it shows up regularly, we then begin to say that's part of their personality when it's really not. And if we expect for us to do better in this life, or do better with our clients, or do better in our communities, we have to identify our trauma. We can't let nobody reduce us to our trauma, and we have to be able to sit with the discomfort of our trauma to free up our nerves so we can take in something more and our healing can begin. So this is one thing that I used to do before COVID, and now we're starting to do it again. But if you see this group of people, whenever a movie come out that could be racially charged, I would collect a whole bunch of people. We would go to of all disciplines. It doesn't matter, you know, what your race, your religion, your sex. It doesn't matter, because we got some white people in here. We got some LGBTQ people in this picture. We have elderly in this picture. We have doctors in this picture. We have kids in this picture. We have people from Africa in this picture. We got some people from Mexico in this picture. We go and we talk. This is how we're building community. This is how we're doing things differently. We're getting together, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable with each other, and we're explaining things about our culture, ourselves, that may not be safe for the broader public, because they may not be interested yet. But I do believe planting seeds, because you never know when it will take root. A lot of seeds that were planted before George Floyd, it took root right after George Floyd. So I believe in planting seeds, even if people ain't ready for them. Now one last thing, and then I could take your questions. Courage does not always roar. Sometimes courage is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I will try again tomorrow. And the day came when the risk to remain tight in the bud was more painful than the risk it took to bloom. And I'm going to end my sharing, and I will take your comments, your questions, your criticisms. I'll take it all.
Sharonda, you are amazing.
Thank you. Absolutely.
You might not be seeing in the chat, but we just keep getting people. I'm just gonna plug it, remind people, fill out the survey at the very end, because this is where you can hear more of these topics, more from Sharonda. Let us hear your voice and your opinion. It is so appreciated. So thank you for being here. People keep also saying that this needs to be a mandatory training. You need to go nationwide. Agree with everything. We love it. We do have a couple questions. Oh, one question too, really quick. Somebody has asked in the questions, can you please show that last slide again?
The last slide, yes.
Yeah, if possible.
Yes.
And then while you're showing that or getting that up, I'll come with a couple more questions.
This was from another training that I did 4 months ago. Yeah, there was what else? Oh, and so just so you guys know, if you haven't seen it yet, and I messed up so bad, I am scared to send out the links to the next training, which is going to be next week. So the next one is going to be on white trauma. And the reason why I want to do one on white trauma is because there are a lot of white people who is carrying guilt and shame for no reason. And they want to approach this subject, but don't know how. And white people, and I would say, I won't just say white people, but I think a lot of people don't understand that white people too carry generational trauma, come from different places, but they still carry it. And how trauma hits the body is the same, but how it shows up in different bodies is going to be different. And I want people to give space for that. And I know some people, white people, felt guilty about talking about their trauma because it's like, this is a quote. What trauma do we have? Stop it. There was another one where it says, well, everything that we've done, why are you focusing on us? I'm gonna tell you why I'm gonna answer that. Because the white culture is a dominant culture. And if white bodies don't get healed, they hurt. Even if they don't want to hurt, they still hurt. Because hurt people hurt other people. And it's not intentional. So I do want to give space for white people to understand even their legacy of trauma and how they can heal and how they can be in community with other people. So that's what I'm doing next week on white trauma. Any questions?
Sorry. Yes.
Any
I'm so
thoughts?
sorry. I was answering a question really quick. Somebody had pointed out that they noticed there's so many ills within the inner city that there should be a national outcry for urban traumatic stress disorder or UTSD.
Agreed.
But there's
Agreed.
not.
No, and I want to say, you know, this is just me thinking. This is just Sharonda's thinking. Like I said earlier, let me see if I got this on my desk real quick. The research into racism is on its way, where they're actually using those words. So I guess my thing is, I guess we got to take it one step at a time. And I'm just happy that we're at least moving in this direction, because until this is kind of irritating to me, I'm not going to even lie to you, that people of color have suffered so much for hundreds of years, but it wasn't until George Floyd got killed that then racism became a public health crisis, although they knew the effects that racism was having on people of color, but they kept denying it and was able to deny it until it became a public health crisis. Now it has to be addressed. That's ridiculous.
Another question we have is, sorry, I had to make sure I was off mute. How do I support other professionals who are of the generation that believes in speaking up when I am from a generation who has chosen silence to facilitate survival? I have tendency to want to protect, I have a tendency to want to protect and, quote, school them. And I often see that their speaking leads them to harm and disillusionment. How can I support them?
I missed some of what you said.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. I'll repeat it.
Okay.
How do I support other professionals who are of the generation that believes in speaking up when I'm from the generation who has chosen silence to facilitate survival?
Oh,
I have a tendency to want to, protect, quote, school them. And I often see that their speaking up leads to harm and disillusionment. How can I support them?
Well, again, if you want, I think what I heard is that you're a person who is silent. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, they're saying they're from a generation who believes or has chosen to be silent to facilitate survival.
So that's one of the ways that white trauma shows up is avoidance. So where's your trauma coming from? What are your concerns of the consequences if you did speak up? Because what I will tell you is we will never know what will happen until we actually take the plunge. And then there is a lot of people who are supporting behind the scenes, but don't want nobody to know that they're supporting behind the scenes. So if you really want to make a big difference, you got to not only speak up, but show up. So support them by whatever it is that they're doing. Like if they're doing Black Lives Matter, or if they're out there with signs, if they're helping organize things that's going to help push back against those in power. If you want to write your congressperson, if you want to, you don't even have to do stuff like, so just yesterday, Kim Black Action Commission got a charter bus, and this is another way we can fight back. Got a charter bus, and we took kids of color, all colors, down to Olympia so they can see how laws are made with the hopes that they would spark an interest in lawmaking, because we need people who look like us in those places. So another thing you can do is support. If someone needs support in trying to make a difference, physical, mental, emotional, financial, that's how you can help, because this work is hard and it weighs you down. And so you have to have that community around you to continue to persevere. If you look at any public figure, Martin Luther King, he had an army of people with him. Malcolm X had an army of people with him. You had Mother Teresa had the parish behind her. You cannot do this by yourself. So whatever you feel like you can do, take baby steps until you can take bigger steps. But just find a way to support the voices until you can find your voice. That's what I would say to that.
Thank you. Another question says, question. A white person is not racist because of trauma. They are racist because they have, sorry, let me repeat. A white person is not racist because of trauma. They are racist because they have been fed racism around the kitchen table. How is white trauma different from saying, quote, all lives matter?
How is white trauma different than quoting all lives matter?
Than saying all lives matter.
So if you remember in the beginning of this presentation, we broke down, first of all of us was born into this mess that we're talking about. And you're right, it's not the trauma that's inside the white bodies that make them racist, but it's the trauma inside the body that brings out the racism that's been downloaded inside of them. So it does do that. And we will talk about that again next week. And I forgot, what is the rest of it? I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. They were just saying a white person is not racist because of trauma. They are racist because they have been fed racism around the kitchen table.
Yes. So how many of us said that we will not, there's some characteristics of our parents that we don't want to, that we will not take on. I will never do that. I will never act like this, blah, blah, blah. And then we find ourselves, when we become parent, we do that, we act like that. Why? Because we was exposed to exposed to things over and over and over again. So when you're exposed to something repetitively, it's going to get in your system whether you want it to or not, whether you like it or not, and it's going to come out whether you want it to or not. So you're right. It's not because of what was, the trauma don't make them racist, but the trauma does push out what has been downloaded inside of them. That's absolutely true. And let me give an example. Maybe this help, maybe this won't help. So I don't remember what year it was. I mean, I guess, well, I'm on my phone, so I can't Google it. But do you remember the situation where Heather Heyer was ran over in Virginia? It was in Virginia. And there was a torchy people saying the Jews will not replace us, and then they drove the car in and one person got killed, and it was Heather Heyer. So they was interviewing the people who were saying the Jews will not replace us, the Jews will not replace us. So 1 year later, they interviewed one of the people who was on the opposite side of the protest, the side that got Heather Heyer killed. Now he's on the other side. So they asked him, they're like, well, what happened? Last year you was on this side, this year you on this side. The guy said, and it's a white guy, he said, and everybody have a need to belong. And sometimes like a cult we know we might be a part of something that we know that we really don't want, but at the same time, we'd rather be a part of something than to be alone or to be by ourselves or not know what our identities is. And so we participate in things we know is not right, just because we want to belong. Gangs, the whole nine, right? So anyway, he said he came out the military and he said he had a hard time finding a job. He said he couldn't find a job and he needed someone to blame. So therefore, he blamed people of color. So that's the easiest people to blame. And then he said what happened was there was a black man who invited him to come to his church. And he said, okay, for whatever reason, he went to the church. He said, once I got to that church, he said, that I finally felt like I belonged. He said, I'm one of 4 white families in this predominantly black church, but I feel like I belong. So when he was stressed out because he couldn't find a job, he couldn't make ends meet for his family, he blamed people of color. When you see white people who killed their family or killed their kids, like a Susan, I can't think of Susan's name, or last name, but Susan ran her kids into the water. She blamed black people. Why do people do that? If it's not about racism and what they've been conditioned to believe, why are they blaming what they say is the inferior race? So you're right. It is not that it's not their trauma that caused them to be racist, but it is the struggle. It is the stress. It is the chronic stress. You got to find someone else to blame. Why? Because your privilege says you don't have to pay attention to this until you have to pay attention to this. And then when you have to pay attention to this, because you haven't done your work, you got to find someone else to blame. And it's the inferior race. It comes out. It is pushed out without your permission. I don't know what other example to give you, but that's what I've seen, and that's what I know to be true. And stress pushes the worst out of all of us, to be honest with you. So whatever we're feeling, and with, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. When we're pissed off, when we're hungry, when our back is up against the wall, the worst parts of us come out. And it's just a matter of what does that look like, and who are we going to target?
Another question
Even if,
oh, sorry.
Yep.
I'm so
No,
sorry.
go ahead.
Please continue.
No. Go ahead.
So our next question is, how do you work through feelings? How do you work through feeling a lot of emotions with clients, who the clients are white, who express microaggressions in sessions with you, being a Black cis woman?
Well, I let them have their truth. I do not deny them their truth because I'm a Black woman. A lot of white bodies go through a lot of things that Black bodies go through, but the difference is, like they said, when white people get the cold, we get the flu. If it's damaging to white people, it's definitely to us. I'm not saying that white people don't have their experiences, because they do, but they don't have it to the level in which Black people have it. So yeah, I let them have their experience. I be present with them in their experience. I help them identify that I understand where you're coming from. And yes, this is real. I validate them. That's what I do. I don't minimize. I don't be like, please, you're white. You got all kinds of privilege. And I don't do anything like that, because I'm not trying to take away from a person's experience.
Our next question is 2 parts. So I'm going to try and say this correctly. First part, how do you approach staff that consistently label you as angry when you're not, but you're also feeling it's not your job to consistently educate them that this is just your face sometimes? And second, and I can go back and repeat the first part too, but second part is, so let's go to the first part. Sorry. How do you approach staff that consistently label you as angry when you're not, but you also feel it's not your job to consistently educate them that this is just how you look sometimes, this is your face?
So, I'm very quick to tell people that I'm from the Midwest. We're different types of people. One thing I learned through President Obama's inaugurations and him becoming president is when Black people do things, we get painted with a broad brush, and all Black people like this, blah, blah, blah. And so President Obama made himself stick out. And so they was able to see him. So with me, I stick out. So people see me. So they can see and understand my trauma and understand my voice. Why? Because if you're not familiar with directness, with these types of face, because we've been conditioned, Black folks have been conditioned to take care of the needs and the emotional needs of white people. And so when we don't do that, it's like, well, this is what it looks like when we're not doing that. You take care of yourself. So I'm very quick to explain to people that my job is not to take care of you. My job is to speak my truth and to show up the way I'm supposed to show up according to who I feel like I am as a person. That's my job. And just like you show up the way you show up, do I tell you, you got to show up differently? And trust me, it was some back and forth. And this is where the conflict come in at. So one of the ways that I got to the point where I am with my coworkers, the CEO, the doctors, I have conversations with every last one of them. My immediate supervisor, the director, all of them standing toe to toe because they're not familiar with someone being an authentic self. They're not familiar with someone raising their voice. They're familiar with the dominance way of doing things where we hold our head down and we hold everything in because we want to be able to provide for our family. They're not used to us speaking up and speaking back. So they got to get used to it, just like we had to get used to them.
I love it, Sharonda. The second part is kind of a question about your next webinar. So I have two different questions about that. I'm going to go ahead and read them really quick. Is the webinar on white trauma, is that targeted for white audience, or are people of color welcome to join that as well? I'm going to think that everybody can join any of our webinars.
Everybody should join because I think there's a big understanding about white people and how they show up, and Black people and how we show up, how Native Americans show up. There's a big misunderstanding, and I think one of the biggest things is people of color don't either realize or talk about or know that white people have generational trauma as well. And what I can tell you is that I also seen white clinicians get very irritated at the fact that they're helping other people with their trauma, but feel like they got to hold theirs in. So that's another real thing that why I want to have the space for white people to deal with their trauma, because I don't want them to feel like they have to hold them in order to look like a professional or act like a professional. You're human before you're a professional, before you got that title. You're human. You endure some things.
Thank you so much. And I think that answered the other question too. So I'm going to move on. As the only person of color mixed Black female staff member in a mostly white school district, is it my responsibility to educate and get the ball rolling on these topics? It just feels like such, sorry, my screen moved. It just feels like such a daunting task. I just don't have my army yet, but
okay,
see the need for one.
So this is what I will say. Every time you show up your authentic self, you're teaching them. When you show up in your afro, you teach them. When you show up in the garment that you wear, you teach them. When you show up with the type of perfume or oil that you use, you're teaching them. When you show up as your authentic self and just have conversation, you're teaching them. We teach people whether we realize it or not. It don't have to be intentional. It could be unintentional, but either way, we're teaching people. Because again, we was conditioned to have straight hair in order to be accepted. We can't have braids. Kids are still getting kicked out of school or having to cut their locks off because of it's still just disgusting to people. This is one of the reasons why we don't say dreadlocks, because dreadful. They said our hair was dreadful. And so therefore, we got to fix our hair to make them more comfortable. That's not our job. Some of the reasons why we get passed over for jobs is because people are looking for people who's going to make them comfortable. It's not our job to make them comfortable. We can be qualified. We can do everything we're supposed to do. We can have the experience, the whole nine, but we will get passed over because they want someone that they can control. They want someone who's going to make them feel comfortable. That is not our job. So just showing up and speaking your truth and not allowing nobody to silence you, trust me, you're teaching them. They don't have to be formal like this. Or give them some books to read. Tell them what books they should be reading. Tell them what's the origin. That's what you're going to do. Or American Fiction. That's another movie that's out. They're going to do that.
On that note, really quick, with sources and books, I have two questions, comments. Somebody earlier on, I don't know if they're still here, asked for your source on healing racial trauma.
I use Kenneth Harding. Kenneth Harding. I think it's Kenneth Harding. Dr.
Okay.
Kenneth Harding work. And just so you guys know, there is trainings that happen once a year, because we know that everything is white centered, where they're trying to they're trying to unteach us or unlearn what we've learned and learn something different to be more effective with people of color. So I met Kenneth Harding last year at a Lutheran church out in, no, it's a private school out in Tacoma. And so every year that school has a conference that tell us what we've been taught and how ineffective it is and what we should be doing for people of color. So I got some of my teachings from him. The Body Keeps the Score is another one that I got. There's another one, The Bodies Keep Coming. And then what was the, because I don't want to give out too many, what was the resources for the healing of the body? Is that right?
Well, healing racial trauma
Yeah.
was the source. Somebody else was also
And
asking. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
now I was gonna look at my Audible library.
Mm.
So my grandmother's hand is another one, which is on the slide. The Bodies Keep Coming, Legacy, Our Hidden Conversation. Oh, well, here, let me give you some. Legacy is by Dr. Blockhead, MD. That should be on the slide. Our Hidden Conversation is by Michelle Norris. That's one of the references on the slide. The Pain We Carry, that is by, that's narrated. I think it's Natalia Gutierrez. So those are some of the books that I turn to from Ozzy and Thierry.
I have 3 more questions.
Yep.
So how do you deal emotionally with the bias between whites and blacks in the workplace? This person is an older black male and still have to work harder to prove themselves versus white people who have it more easier. So how do you deal emotionally with the bias in the workplace?
Well, I tell you, my allies help a lot in the workplace. There was this director, and we was in an all-staff meeting, and one of my colleagues, white colleagues, she says, we got to start hiring more people of diverse group to match the kind of population in which we're working with. And she said, and as I look around, it is indicative of a bunch of white faces. And the director said, yeah, that's because white people are better at showing up and getting things done. I didn't have to say a word. Didn't have to say a word. They went in on her. Dealing with other people's, but I call them out. I call it out on the spot. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when you wait, you hold things in, it festers. And then when something minor happens and it comes out and it seems bigger than what it really should be, like you react to something, say something happened this week, something big, and you just hold it in because you want to hold your peace. You don't want to be confrontational. You don't want to be that angry person. And then next week, something else happens that may not be as significant. And then all that situation has triggered the trauma that you experienced with the person the week prior. And you have this big reaction. And so therefore, when that happens, they won't take you seriously because it's like, well, look, that's what I'm talking about. She's just overreacting again. You shouldn't hold anything in. You should tell it, explain or talk about it when it originally happened for that reason. But the second reason is because even if we pull the person to the side and want to talk about it later, I don't remember that. I didn't say that. I didn't say it like that. I think he misunderstood. No. You got to get people right then and there so they won't have a lapse in memory. At least that's my personality. I'll put it that way.
I think this definitely goes into the next question. I'm just going to say the scenario in the beginning. This is a Black woman who's the only Black manager at her organization. She has a white woman on her team and within the organization that constantly talks down to her, doesn't follow leadership. For instance, this person will say one thing, the other person will argue, but if her director says the same thing, there's no questions and the person will follow their direction. The person asking the question is burnt out, and this is what constantly happens to people of color in her organization. What can she do to help eliminate the imposter syndrome that she's now seeing in herself, and how can she be seen and heard?
You won't be seen or heard until you are ready to be seen and heard. And you have to be ready for whatever the consequences. See, here we go back to what I said earlier. Either you can suffer the internal consequences, which is damaging, or you can speak up and suffer whatever external consequences that may come your way. Whether you're insubordinate, you're, I'm going to write you up, whatever. At least you got it out your body and you're no longer holding that on your nerves, which is making things worse for you. Because as I said, white people outlive Black people by 25 years because of the chronic stress that we put ourselves under by trying to meet their approval. And understand something, we can do everything underneath the sun right, but it still doesn't mean we're going to meet their approval. And the other thing that I have done in the past is be like, why are you talking at me? Some white people are so conditioned to have their privilege and have the upper hand and for you to be submissive that they don't even realize that that's how they're coming off. One of the examples of, and I think this is in my grandmother's hand if I'm not mistaken, there was this young girl, because of what's been downloaded in her mind and how she's been conditioned. The woman walked out of the store, a Black woman walked out of the store, you know how they check your receipt and they mark it. And the lady went to go sit down because she was tired or whatever. And the next thing that she noticed was that she looked up and she seen that the white lady who was checking the receipt, she wasn't checking the white people receipt, she was only checking the people of color receipt. So that lady got upset, to say the least. Went to go find the manager, told the manager what was happening. The manager came out and confronted the young white girl, and she was literally surprised. Like, she had no idea that that's what she was doing. So sometimes we do stuff for so long, we have no idea that we've been doing it anymore. So until, and this is what I said, well, this is what I do know. I'm on the inside looking out. You're on the outside looking in. Both of those perspectives are necessary for me to see how I am showing up, right? So I'm not right about myself all the time, nor are the people looking at me right about me all the time. But I provide a perspective, they provide a perspective that allows me to get a better gauge, right? So sometimes people are doing stuff that they have no idea that they're even doing. And until you bring it to their attention, they may not know. But once you bring it to their attention, they continue to do it. Now it's intentional. Now we got to come at it at a different way. And another thing that I had to do was I met with HR for twice a month for a whole year to talk about how punitive the system is. And when people of color is being written up or whatever the case may be, these are the reasons why. So by the time we got done with that full year, the HR lady brought a situation to me, and she's like, and this is what I got from it. And so her whole mind had opened up. So she understood what was happening, and she was so happy. She was so happy that she was starting to get it, that she came down with a two-tier system, meaning that, so let's say I made a complaint about my supervisor, and let's say my supervisor was racist, and then they investigate, but they didn't find anything. So they'll come back to me and say, okay, Sharonda, so what do you want to do? Do you want us to sit down with you and your supervisor so we can have a conversation so they can understand what's going on with you, or do you just want to let it go? Or that never happens. If they don't find anything, we just move on. Now it's not like that. Now you get an option if you complain and they don't find anything. If they do find something, then they're going to go ahead and take whatever action they need to take. But there wasn't a two-tier system until the conversation was being had on a regular basis for them to begin to understand even their biases and how they're showing up, and are they pushing a supremacy type agenda. So it is, it's going to take work. people. That's what I really can tell you.
I have 2 more questions, and we have just a few more minutes. So next question is, I have a participant that is a person of color. I myself am white. Anytime we run into conflict and the participant doesn't get the answer he wants, he tells me I'm not doing my job correctly because I'm white. How can I navigate this conversation with him?
I'm gonna ask him, why would you narrow it down to that? Like, there are no other options only because of the fact that I'm white? If there's something that you feel like I don't know, tell me, educate me, show me. Don't reduce me to my color, as you don't want me to reduce you to your color. Help me to understand what you feel like I don't understand. That's what I would do.
That's great. I love, and it goes back to, what you said earlier, seeking understanding before seeking to be understood as well. I wrote that down. Love it. We just have,
and just,
like
and just because you, and I'm sorry, and I know a lot of white people take that kind of feedback out of guilt. The shrink, and they begin to shrink down. That's not helpful, white people. That's not helpful at all. You have to engage. Why are you saying this? What am I missing? Tell me it is what you need. Since I don't have a clue, you teach me what I need to know about you so we can make this right.
We have 5 minutes left, and we're going to go ahead. I'm leaving this last statement because I think it's a perfect way to end, but Peyton has been great and put in the link for our evaluation. This last comment is, Sharonda, I just want to say that your passion shines. This topic, this life, it's a hard one. Any word said aloud can place a target on a person of color's back. I truly appreciate
100%.
your strength and your passion and your knowledge. And those are just perfect words. Perfect.
Yeah. So I will tell you this. I can't begin to say how many white people come up to me and say, Sharonda, thank you for giving me permission. So in the opening, when I say the practice, people say, I will have never allowed myself to feel these feelings had you not given me permission. I would never give myself permission. So thanks for giving me permission. And then there's people who go home and have these hard conversations with their family, come back. It was a 2-day training I did in Oregon because I was there for 2 days. And they came back the next day and was like, you gave me the tools that I needed to have this hard conversation with my family. She said it was a hard one. It was a 3-hour conversation, but it worked out and it was really good. So sometimes people just need the tools or the encouragement or, unfortunately, the permission to go forth. So I try to give white people permission, and then I try to be the voice for Black people and other people of color who have lost their voice until they can find it again. That's the goal. Sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. Grace and mercy and love, people. Grace, mercy, and love goes a long way. And that's it.
And all that are here, if you still are interested, Sharonda, sign up for her webinar next week. And we have Lamar in 2 days also speaking.
Wait, I got one last thing. To say to Black people. Black folks, hear me out. Our history do not start with slavery. Our history starts with kings and queens, intelligence, knowledge. We're creative individuals. So don't reduce yourself to the slave mentality, because we're more than that. We're better than that, and we're stronger than that. We just got to tap into it. That's what I needed to say.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you for dealing with all the tech issues, everyone. That we did it.
Oh my God, that's my fault.
We got through it, and now we all know. So thank you all. We're going to stick around for a few minutes if you have any questions, but just a reminder, the webinar recording will be sent out via email with the slides, all the resources, everything. Yeah, thank you so much, Rhonda. Do you have anything else left to say?
Love, peace, and grace, people. Love, peace, and grace.
Good words to end on.